Hi everyone, and welcome back to another IBRACORP video. We're on fire this week, and the next video, based on all the comments you've been giving me, is why you should use custom Docker networks in Unraid. If you've been running Docker containers in Unraid, you've probably seen the options for bridge, host, or none when it comes to networking. Now, they work, but if you really want your setup to be secure, reliable, and easier to manage, you should be using custom Docker networks in our opinion. Today, I'll show you why they matter, the benefits you get, and how to create one in just a couple of steps. Plus, I'll share a few pro tips to make your setup even cleaner. So, without stuffing around, let's get stuck into it. So, what are Docker networks? Think of Docker networks like virtual LANs inside of your server. By default, containers get dumped into the same bridge network. That works fine for testing, but as you add more and more containers, you can see how many we've got here, for example, you might even have even more, it starts to get a little messy. Custom networks let you create your own isolated lanes, where containers can talk to each other securely and only if you want them to. So, why use custom Docker networks? Here's what you get when you move to custom networks. 1. Name resolution. What does that mean? Containers can find each other by name instead of using IPs that change. Now that becomes useful when you start going into, if you change your IP address at home or on your server, you can make sure that the Docker containers themselves are referring to each other by the name of the containers rather than an IP. So instead of you having to then go and update IPs across all your different apps and configs, they're already referring to each other by name. So you simply can keep it the same if you're just updating that custom Docker network instead. The next benefit is security. Containers are isolated by default. They can't talk to each other unless you connect them. The next benefit is a cleaner configuration. You can attach a container to multiple networks, like a private backend and a public front end. It also helps with things like reverse proxy compatibility. So once we start adding in our labels for something like traffic, or if you're using Nginx Proxy Manager, Swag, any other sort of reverse proxy, it's going to be a lot easier again with your configuration when they're using the container names or host names instead of IP addresses. It will make your life a lot easier in that respect as well. And the big one is future-proofing. As your stack continues to grow, custom networks keep things organized and much easier to troubleshoot. So a useful example would be, for example, if you wanted all of your media backend apps, things that do all the grabbing, the naming, the metadata, you could have them on one custom network. You could have anything to do with your networking or reverse proxies on another. However you wish to set it up, it gives you that flexibility. Now, because networking isn't always in your face, you kind of just tend to go along until you get to a point where you realize you've created all this technical debt and overhead above you. And so maintaining that becomes even harder. So trying to get this through your head at first and organizing things cleanly to start with is going to be the best bet so that you're future-proofed. A quick analogy might be, it's like having different Wi-Fi networks at home, one for guests, one for family, one for your IoT devices. It keeps everything organized and secure. So then if you wanted to add even more advanced configuration later, you've already kind of got that grouping and categorization sorted out on a network level. So let's talk about setting one up. First, we want to create the network. Now, the easiest way to do this in Unraid, and this applies anywhere you're running Linux, is open up your terminal. So here we are on our terminal, and the first thing we've done is type in docker network create IBRACORP. If you're not sure how to open the terminal on Unraid, it's usually in the top right hand corner with this little terminal icon. Again, if you're using any other Linux distribution, wherever your terminal is, it will apply the same. So if you're using something like Docker Compose or just Docker straight into your Linux server, just use it in the terminal. It's no different on Unraid to any other Docker environment. So if we go ahead and press enter now, so we've hit enter and it's spat out this giant identifier here. The next thing we can do is actually make sure that that applied. So what we can do is say docker network ls to list them out. And it's going to list out all the Docker networks we currently have configured. As you can see, we've got BR1, we've got bridge, host, IBRANet, IBRAProxy, and none. And IBRAProxy is the one we just created, so I know for a fact that it has been created. And I can even match that identifier to the one it gave us earlier. So after you create it, the next thing you want to do is go to a particular container you might have running. So I'll go to one on my stack that isn't really critical for me at the moment. And once you open up the container template, you can change the network type to that new custom Docker network. Go ahead and click apply. Simple as that, right? Now, if you want to test it out, what we can also do is grab another container or set something else up that has that same network. So we'll go to Bazaar, for example, and we'll put that on the same network, and done. Open up your terminal again, and a quick test we can do is something like this. So as you can see, we've typed in docker execute or exec -it, the name of one container, and ping to the other container. What have we established here? We don't need to use an IP address. It's returning the IP address. We are using the host name, or in our case, the container name, which translates to the host name when it comes to Docker containers. So with this simple step, we've now been able to establish that a connection between the two containers can be done without hardwiring an IP address, which is great for us. So if we decide to change IP addresses of our server, the containers are not going to be affected. I'll hit Control-C and change that. And what we'll do is, instead of going to a container that's on that same network, we'll go to one that's on a different network. So I'll say Prowler, for example. And instantly you'll see the response telling us that it's a bad address. So what we've done essentially is segregate those two containers. They can talk to each other on that network, but they cannot talk to anything outside of it. That provides us better security, and it also makes sure that the containers we want to talk to each other are the only ones that can do so. Okay, so let's say you decided that, you know what, I don't want to use that custom Docker network anymore, or maybe you created a new one. You can just revert back in the container template. Make sure you do this step first. Then pop your terminal open again. Go ahead and type docker network remove, and then the name of that custom Docker network. Just double check you've typed it correctly, and it will remove it once you hit enter. So now if I go back into a container template, that custom network is now gone. So some tips I'll give you is you can create multiple custom networks, for example, one for front-end apps and another for databases. Containers can belong to more than one network, which is great for a reverse proxy that needs to connect to different services. So that's an important one. So you might be able to attach several different container networks if you so wish, so that one container can talk to many, but many only talk to one. Think about it in that sense. Now, usually what I'd like to recommend is avoid using host mode unless you absolutely have to. It bypasses Docker's isolation and can expose services directly. Now, you'll notice here, if you're looking at mine, for example, all of mine are on a custom network, and fair enough, they are actually on the same custom network. So even I haven't gone down the route of splitting out everything too much. However, you'll notice Plex runs on host. This is completely optional. You can get it to work on a custom Docker network, but I've personally found that the hassle that it causes for me, it's not really worth it in my sense. And besides, Plex is always at some point reaching out of your network. So I've left that as is, and it may be revisited in the future. Finally, the most important tip I think I can give you when it comes to the Unraid side of things, if you're an Unraid user, is making sure you go to settings, Docker. You will have to stop the Docker service. Make sure you shut down all your Docker containers first. You can just go by either stop all or manually stop them yourself, going each one. Then come into settings, Docker, enable Docker no. That will stop the Docker service from running. And then while you're in there, you'll see a particular option. It's called preserve user defined networks. And if you just click on it, thankfully Unraid gives you some helpful tips there. It will explain it as well. So if you don't change this setting and you've got custom Docker networks in place, the potential of those networks being removed is there. So you want to make sure you set that in order to preserve them for you. And that way Unraid will hold onto them. Once you've set that and you're happy, you can feel free to check all the other settings we've got here as well. I will explain these in a separate video. Just trying to keep the runtime short today for you all. But once you're happy, go ahead and enable the Docker service again, and then you can start your containers if they're not automatically starting. So that's it, custom Docker networks. A simple change that makes your setup more secure, easier to manage, and more reliable. If you're setting up reverse proxies or just want to future-proof your stack, this is one of the first things you should do. Now, I'm curious, do you mostly run containers on Bridge, Host, or do you already use custom networks? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if this helped, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned for more Unraid and self-hosting tutorials. We'll see you in the next IBRACORP video.